you said a word just now, captive population. Now you see that's a serious term, and perhaps I can ask the brothers Dan and Sensi, when it comes to captive and population, the word captive alone, I mean, it implies so much. It's almost that your sovereign rights were taken from you, and you're now going to be functioning under our rule, under our law and jurisdiction. So can you shed some light on what does that mean to be a captive population? And then what redress, what recourse does one have in that position from a legal perspective?
That's a lot to unpack, Emmanuel, but we are all on this planet at this moment in that position. So what that gentleman said in St. Kitts was from a playbook that you could hear our premiers in Canada saying, the Prime Minister. This globalist communist mentality is a fiction. It's a corporate structure. And there's no difference really in that structure, whether it's St. Kitts or Grenada or Barbados, this Commonwealth construct, we're all part of it. And until people understand how it was created and how to step out of it, they won't realize they have the power to do many things. Just a comment on the volcano, our intelligence sources in the States have also denoted that it's not a natural event, and it's more than what the geothermal is doing. There's a lot of energies that are affecting the planet right now that do not originate within the planet. But I can tell you that if you remember a couple of years ago in Hawaii, Mount Kilauea was erupting in a serious way. And the forces that mitigated it, like the ones that mitigated the Fukushima nuclear reactor, are at work right now to assist. All the peoples of the earth have to develop a unity consciousness, no matter what religion, what ideology, what philosophy. There's a spiritual battle that we're all in. And the first step for an individual is to empower themselves with knowledge and understanding, to understand what jurisdictions are, what they can do to step out of the corporate fiction, because that enslavement, the debt enslavement, started way back in both our countries, actually, with Prince Rupert and King Charles II, with the Hudson's Bay Charter, and for the Barbados, especially with the Royal African Company. These charters that were given, that's piracy. And it's evolved into, as if you all remember, all of the Commonwealth nations through Benjamin Disraeli, I don't know if you followed that, in 1867, started the whole enfranchisement of human beings. In other words, creating the registration process, which takes the power from the human to vote, to get any of the services from these corporations, including baiting them to get their birth certificates registered. That's and right. Creating a corporate fiction. So people don't realize that any of these people that are the head of these corporations, they're not a government. They're not even de facto. They're illegitimate right now, because if people understood what's taking place on the planet with the Jazara of all the economies and the new financial system that's coming in, and I'm not speaking of the globalist reset. I'm talking about going back to an asset gold-backed system where real value of the people of our country, their assets, are distributed not in a just an income that they do nothing for, but that they can work as an individual to the level that they want to. But we're talking about in common law, and for all our countries, right? English law is rooted in common law. You can go back to the Magna Carta and before. These rights were taken away step by step from the late 17th century with the Bill of Rights in the UK Parliament, and all the way up to now. The rights of people are in our charters. I know in Barbados, you really don't have a constitution like we don't. There was a consolidation of letters patent. There's never been a de jure constitution seated in any of our countries. And people have to recognize that it's time to step out of the corporate structure by demanding control, because we are the beneficiary of the corporation called our birth certificates. right? And the so-called monarchy is not the crown. And once people understand what these entities are and what they're doing and how the financial system ties into it, which is going to be, we're going to be free from soon, we'll never have true freedom until people have the knowledge to step out and say, I'm not participating. And through a coherent collective confluence of a unity consciousness, create the reality in harmony with the natural laws of the universe, of the planet, from the galactic codex on down, that this common law is really a spiritual law that everybody on the planet, no matter what country, can work with and towards. But the first step is to empower the people, like we did with the parents, to protect the children in Canada and develop a common law process where we don't wait for the statutory police to do anything, because they're not protecting the rights under their oaths. They're not following the Police Services Act, and this is happening in every country. And like we are up here and in the UK and down in your countries, you are being directed by unelected people in privy councils, in the health departments that have no right to do this, only the ear of the enforcement officers that don't remember their oaths and don't remember they're there to protect the people. So the first step, and tonight, my understanding is we want to just go through what we can do right now for the people to organize. And we started with the Citizens Arrest and Self-Defense Act to protect children, in whether it's in schools or even the thought of this genetic modification to children, adults. We even have in Canada now big problems with insurance companies where they have exclusions related to contagions. They will not insure anybody that has taken this genetic modification. And that's a big issue. So because people don't believe this, that it's what Judge Alford just said, the first step they've got to do is they run a business, they're going to find the insurance companies will not protect them if anything happens to any of the people that come in for their service, which, as it relates to picking up any of these spike proteins that are being produced by the people who take the genetic codes. What we're dealing with, if people really understood it, should stop the planet in its tracks right now. Genocide, slavery, right, on and on it goes, piracy. What they've done with the corporate fiction, right, is to take everything that's on the land and into the jurisdiction of admiralty law in the sea, right, is totally illegal. It was abolished 200 years ago. But under the color of law and calling it organization of corporations, it's really a form of piracy. And it's going to stop very shortly. There's a big movement people don't know about with an alliance on the planet that integrates with the inner world and the galactic world. This is going to get corrected very soon. But people individually have to wake up and step up and say, excuse me, you're a divine man or a divine woman, whatever your spiritual predilection is, it is your free will and choice, because those that look at us on or off world say you have to hold reverence, free will and choice. And that's the first thing we teach people. You do have a choice. You are not you're not held in slavery by these corporations. They have, through a constructive fraud, a fraudulent conversion, taken our certificates of birth and made a birth certificate. In fact, they kill you at death with a corporation. The truth is we're the beneficiary of that corporation. What we're doing in Canada, along with the common law, is to get that corporation back away from them. Right now in the United States, the alliance that's going to clean up what's happening there has 37 states that are signed on to go back to the Republic. And the Republic, and this ties into what Judge Alford has done. When the Republic is announced, we will become the United States of North America. And in essence, everything goes back to common law. That will include what's happening in the UK right now. There are international groups of the World Doctors Alliance, 1,000 lawyers working through Rainer Fumick in Germany. Right, you've got the Italians going after the PCR test. Every step of this process to this thing they call COVID is designed to damage people. Nobody should get tested, right? Nobody should be wearing a mask. every step, it's been proven by science that there's dangers in doing these things. It is a serious matter, and everybody should stand up collectively together and understand that we can do something about this, but it's a spiritual battle first. It's a choice, and if they make the choice and stand on the pillars of principle, the waves of adversity will subside. But beyond that, if you have any questions about conducting a common law court or pulling out from the corporate fiction that these corporations have, I can say what I've studied with your countries are all part of the Organization of American States, right? You're all part of that. You're all part of us. This ends up in the international bodies that include all the outline of the international covenants on civil and political rights, international covenant on economic and social rights. We have, number one, the right of self-determination. The first step is to remember that we are not a corporate fiction. We're not part of the admiralty law on the sea. It's time to take back our hands and our land and take charge of it. These people are fake news. They are illegitimate. And the royalty, the Buckingham Palace, the Vatican, the corporate United States right now has all been seized by the alliance. They have no legitimacy. And when this comes out, people understand that anybody running these countries and these corporations are not legitimate.
You talk about me giving a mouthful. That's interesting, because if international law, treaty law trumps all, then the judge and Dan and Sensi and Yaoi, I hope I got that right, trust me, it would imply then that if an individual has been done a wrong and injustice against whatever law they're looking to impose and goes to international court, then the international court must grant a hearing, especially if it's a violation of civil rights, well, statutory rights, I suppose.
Human rights, or yeah. But of course, the very treaties prescribe that you should first exhaust domestic law. But an individual can go directly to the court, and then there's a procedure set down as to what you have to do, whether it is the United Nations or the Criminal Court or the OAS. There's a procedure, but all of it leads to the fact that the international law should take precedence.
Wow.
If I can interject, there is one distinction here, and it relates to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Number one, we have the right to self-determination. So as an individual in any of our countries, if we deem ourselves not part of the corporation, and you go to the Common Law Court International and make a declaration of that you own yourself, you're not a corporate fiction of the birth certificate or driver's license, you do not work for the corporation, you're not paid by it. Therefore, if you've not consented to any of these laws that they're trying to promulgate, then they have no force or effect. So this is the thing people really don't understand. If you are not part of that corporation and you don't get paid by them, you don't get consideration, you do not stand under their jurisdiction.
And they have no jurisdiction over you.
No, the laws do not apply.
But you're governed by consent. So the question would be, if you don't consent, what happens then?
Well, exactly. Well, that's the point. What we're facing right now is that in either civil or common law in these countries, if someone has like in Canada, we have a charter, we have a Constitution Act, right? We have a Bill of Rights, we have the international covenants, which will be our ultimate remedy, along with the universal laws. They're not being respected. They are being stepped on, where we have police services at every level completely violating in an unlawful way people's freedom. So the only way we're going to turn the tide on this is that people collectively wake up and start to say no and take action, like we've done in Canada as an example. We've done a citizen's arrest and self-defense action. Then we had a common law court from parents who have requested from the community, right? They made a notice of claim and a notice of claim of right to organize the community, to develop a grand jury, to conduct a common law court that gave a verdict. We then transferred that verdict to Judge Weber, who was kind enough to, under the auspices of the tribunal, make a judgment. That judgment is going to, among other places, a military tribunal run by the Americans. And you know right now, they're running military tribunals in Guantanamo Bay, but also to The Hague through Reiner Fuellmech's group to start Nuremberg too. So the point being is that people who are taking actions that are totally violating people's rights to the point of genocide, right, there will be a consequence. And through the step from the street level, the action, parents protecting their children, to a common law court, to a verdict, to the tribunal with Judge Weber, to the international tribunal with the people like Reiner Fuellmech that is conducting or organizing Nuremberg 2, they'll be on the list. And all of these corporate jurisdictions, so to speak, have been notified. The cease and desist, right, from the common law court, from the Judge Weber's tribunal. If we get this going through the whole world, don't underestimate the power of this, because there are those that are watching in the alliance, in the military in the US that are positive, in the military in the US, Canada that's positive, that are supporting it because they're not stopping it. But the people have to get moving to take the step.
Let me answer this then. That question comes up. So if there's a judgment, you find an individual guilty of crimes against humanity. Therefore, everybody, it's a conspiracy, clearly. There's ministers, there's doctors, there's people in the government who are all nurses, who are all working behind the scenes to maintain this particular fraud. Who then has the authority or the power then to enforce an arrest warrant is the question.
Okay, we offer the statutory authorities through the Citizens Arrest and Self-Defense Act to make that action. If they turn it down, we do the common law court and then pass the verdict along to the tribunal. And the tribunals are denoting them. It'll go to Nuremberg 2, and at that point, they will be on the list. And it's starting to cause a rumble with people in Canada where, is this really true? Is this really going to happen? They're taking it seriously now. And if all countries stood up and started to do this, where the people are empowered, as they are rightfully so, right, then it'll, I'm sure, will gain, it's already gaining momentum. But the point is that once the alliance announces that they've taken over through the military, the country from the corrupt government that exists right now, then common law will be announced. It will be the law of the world. It's really important that you, this is the crux of the matter for all of us, right? If you go back even as far as the so-called coronation in 1953, and then to the start of the European Union in 1973, Elizabeth Windsor was never coronated. It was the crown that was coronated, and the crown is not the monarchy. Okay,
that's right.
1973.
That's right.
All of the powers related to that were given to the European Union. So the point is that what we're dealing with is illegitimate de facto corporations. They're not governments.
That's right.
Corporations, and we're not part of them if we don't want to be part of them. And we're at
that's
that
where Dan comes
now.
in to tell us how do we get out of that. Matter of fact, I was telling some folks about this book right here. I know you might be familiar with this one. It's very interesting. How do you free yourself from legal tyranny?
The first step is to recover your birth certificate.
That's right.
Okay, so you declare through the Common Law Court International that you're given names, not the legal fiction, right? That you demand from these corporations the money they have made off of you, right? You step out of that structure.
Okay, so how do you go about doing that? You get up one morning, you take a shower,
you start
go down
by
to the court.
getting control of your birth certificate.
Okay.
The rules
So
of
that's
civil, the rules
from
of
a legal
civil
perspective, Batiste, how does one go about addressing that in the court as it stands today?
But I'm trying to understand the concept. You know, even getting a birth certificate, you have to get the permission of the registrar now, and you have to, you cannot just go to the birth certificate. You cannot just go to the registry anymore and take out your birth certificate.
No, we're not. That's the whole point. We're not dealing with the corporation, because you know, if you do a registration, you relinquish ownership. We are in fact beneficiaries of the corporation they call the birth certificate.
Right.
So what I'm suggesting to you, what we've done in Canada, and this is the first step for people to do the common law court, is that they get control and declare themselves by their given names, and they just make a distinction between, through a declaration, they are not a corporate fiction, they are not part of the corporation that are running their respective countries.
So you file that with the court?
Pardon me?
You file that with the court?
Not with the legislative court, with the common law court international.
Okay.
You don't give them any type of validity, because the rules of civil procedure do not apply to a living, breathing man or woman. It's been a fraud that's been perpetrated on people to think that the legislative corporate scheme, which is civil law, which is Roman law, right, applies to a living, breathing person. And when people really get that in their minds and understand that they're not dead, they're a living, breathing person, and the rules of civil procedure do not apply to them, they don't stand under their jurisdiction, everything changes. And how they know that is they don't work for that corporation, they've not been paid by it. They're not governments. They use the term government, but they're actually businesses. And they run under maritime law, which means the inland waters and territorial seas. They've taken possession through a registration process, birth certificates, driver's licenses, mortgages, taking those possessions off the land into the sea, which is illegal. It's piracy, right? 200 years ago, someone would be executed for doing something like that. But because they use corporations, they've gotten away with it. My recommendation is to really focus on that point with everybody in all our countries. This is not a legitimate structure. The corporations are a business. They're not a legitimate de jure constitution. I don't know about St. Vincent, but I know in Canada, we've never had seated a de jure constitution. I know Barbados doesn't have one. Most countries in the Commonwealth don't have their own constitution like the 1776 Constitution of the United States. Everybody's got to realize the structure from England of 1871 is now dissolved. The Corporation of England is bankrupt. The Corporation of the United States is bankrupt. The Corporation of Canada is bankrupt, right? They are illegitimate entities. And right at this moment in time, we have an opportunity collectively in all our countries. The people understand there's a distinction between that corporate fiction and a living, breathing person. And when common law is announced, the law of the people, and then through the verdicts through the tribunals, this will be corrected. But don't give validity or legitimacy to these corporations because they're not legitimate, because all the corporations are franchises. People have been there's been enfranchisement of a human. That's enslavement. And that's what people really got to get their head around. And until we have a structure where the bank doesn't work with the corporation that can take your money out of your bank account, which all our countries have that. Right now, someone, if they don't like you, they can put a freeze on your bank account. And make no mistake, through these genetically coded spike proteins, there's nanotechnology in there to get to the point where, through the hydrogel and the biometrics that they're going to have, the idea is that when this synthetic genetics get into our nucleus, they can patent us, right? They will do the social credit system. They will get to the point where they want robots. And right now, we've got to make a move to stop it. We have to first recognize we're living, breathing people. And we don't have to ask anybody to say that. That's the point. The corporations are not the power.
How practically can someone in St. Vincent start this new ideology, way of thinking? Is it only in Canada where you have this?
No, it's worldwide, because this all started. We're all part of the Commonwealth common law, English law, which goes back. The whole point of going back to 1625 and the Hudson's Bay Charter, or the American or the Royal African Charter with Barbados. I don't know what it was in St. Vincent, but the point is that there's a timeline. Emmanuel, you talked about the age of Aquarius timeline. We have to go back to an understanding what took place in the early 17th century, and then redefine recognize that so many rights have been taken away, and that
you're correct. You're absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, in Barbados, it was if I'm not mistaken, the Barbados Charter that was originally written and well put together by Lord Willoughby that later became what they call the Barbados Constitution. So they took a charter that he had written in 1652, if not mistaken, and actually turned that into Barbados Constitution back then. Of course, I'm sure that the
same thing has happened in Canada, and I'm sure the same thing happened in St. Vincent.
Yeah, and so was I think of Paris in 1763, where this is where they divided up and decided that we would be even British for that matter.
And of course, the where that leads to is the banking system, which is shifting now from the Swiss system to the quantum financial system. And when that happens, nobody can take the monies, because usually if people understood of all the taxes paid inside any country, only 20% actually goes back to the people. Only 2% of it goes to different countries that they think that they're helping. But you folks, like we are in Canada, we're part of the Organization of American States. We're part of the UN Charter. We're part of all that. In other words, if something happens to one of us, it's happening to all of us.
That's right. That's
okay,
right.
So if something can be done in one of us, the movement can be with all of us.
Wow.
It's all the same, because right now I can tell you that the assets of Buckingham Palace, what you understand the monarch to be in the crown, have been seized. They're not legitimate, which means the UK Parliament's not legitimate, Canada's Parliament's not legitimate, and I'm sure with your countries it's not legitimate, and people have to really get an understanding. We have an opportunity to start again and say, excuse me, whoever's thinks they are in charge, they don't have the power to tell you what to do. And Judge Weber can tell you best about the Nuremberg Code, but when you're doing a genetic modification on a human being where something has not had a third level trial, I mean, that's against the Geneva Convention. It's against the Nuremberg Code. Like, these are international laws.
It's a fact. It's true.
And in Section 7 of the International Criminal Code, they can't do these things, right? So that's why at the base level, we do the common law court, we get a verdict, we send it to Judge Weber, we get it to an international level. This will be held to account. And as soon as, I'm telling you, as soon as this banking system gets the shift, and we're very close to it now, these people will not be able to take money just whenever they want. Because right now we've surmised that probably $2 trillion since the 70s have been taken out of Canada, that have been siphoned off by these corporations. Much more in the US, your countries, I'm sure it's been taken. And that's just out and out racketeering.
Well, how do we start looking in the Caribbean, like you, Commonwealth? Because I was saying to someone, we need to have a body in the Caribbean that's separate from the quote unquote system, that does its own independent
no, just use the word, if I can, just use the word sovereign.
Sovereign, perfect.
Tell
a sovereign body. How do we start a sovereign community or a common law court in the Caribbean?
Tell them to look in the mirror, number one, right? And then then they declare their own, excuse me, their own, and get control of their birth certificate, right? So their given names are the real person that they are, right? Once they've done that, and then they have a situation, say we've started with the families with the children. We've told them, okay, you don't like the way your children are being treated by the police, by the schools, the masks, all of it. Like, you know, all the science behind the damage that's being done. What do you want to do about it? So we said, we'll give the statutory side a chance, the Citizens Arrest and Self-Defense Act in Canada. And then we told the police, look, the parents are telling you the kids are not being protected. Will you do something? They said no. And said, okay, now we're going to do a common law court. Through a statement of claim, the parents made a claim of right to call in their community a common law court. There's steps that you take through the court.
For some procedure, I know you seem to say that there are no rules as such, but is there a general precedent?
Yes, we'll send it to you.
Please.
Yes.
Really
and then
absolutely.
And then then the people get a verdict. Verdict is sent to the tribunal makes a judgment, and then we go from there.
Okay. So basically it's the same law, because you have to exhaust certain channels in order to get to the
no. We were just out of courtesy. We've said to
the courtesy. Okay.
At statutory level, we'll give them a chance. They're people too.
Right. Granted. I follow you.
the idea of empowerment is to get people to understand that the statutory side of things, the corporation, is separate from free, living, breathing people, because in their world, we're a person, we're a corporate fiction, we're not alive.
We're really individuals.
And at the beginning of birth, when a parent is said to register their child, it is a fraud. It's a constructive fraud, a fraudulent conversion of a certificate of birth to a birth certificate where you've registered your child. You no longer own your child. You're no longer, the state owns that asset. And if everybody understood that your birth certificate has been traded, it has a QSIP number to the point between $5 and $10 million has been made on it. And understand that when you have a debt,
hold on a minute. Whoa, go back there. Go back there a bit. What are you talking about? $5-10 million. I got some bills, man.
Well,
no, you don't.
let's take your bill. Do you have a mortgage?
No, I actually rent.
Okay, but in a corporate structure, whether you have an electrical bill or a mortgage, that's a bill of exchange. So what the utility company does is takes that bill of exchange to the government, and the government will pay that utility company with your tax money. And at the same time, they will take that bill and give it to you and say, pay the bill, or else we'll cut your hydro off. They've been paid for it twice. With a mortgage, they will do it 3 and 4 times, because to a bank in their banking system, a mortgage document is a promissory note. It has cash value. So when you get a mortgage, as an example, that mortgage has already been paid for the moment you sign the document in the banking system. Yet they will enslave you to make the payments and sign over your security of that, because you never hold title. You are the beneficial title holder, but you do not hold that property. That's their corporate structure in the banking system, and that's got to stop.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where's Alex? Alex, I should have had you up on here on this. This is starting to see, again, it's a language. If you're familiar with it, it makes sense. If you're hearing this for the first time, I'm sure that people watching this scratching their head thinking, what is he talking about? You know, looks like he has a Harley Davidson Parks outside. You gotta be kidding me. So the reality though is that there are people who will hear this and be wondering, okay, where do I turn? Where do I turn? So like you said, you reclaim your sovereign self, your identity as an individual. Yeah, Dan, what's that you got there, Dan? ID?
So this is what Sensei was talking about right here. You don't need one of these. It's an option. The website you go to is commonlawcourt.com. All one word, all lowercase, www.commonlawcourt.com. And that part is completely free of charge. And this is what Sensei was talking about. It's a really simple process. You go, and it says right on the front page, declare your birth certificate.
Well, this is similar to what the Moorish science will be teaching. I'm sure you're familiar with Moorish Temple of America, that teach individuals, especially of African, or what we call African descent, to reclaim their identity by not subscribing to the United States, the corporation called United States. So again, the Caribbean, some individuals might be familiar with the language, but like St. Vincent, for example, St. Vincent is home to the original indigenous people called the Garafunas. I don't know if you ever heard. This is the Maroons, the Maroon people. I mean, the Hyroons. This is sacred land. You know, no wonder the volcano is a little upset. Y'all are violating natural law. You know, that's part of it.
You make a good point, because in Canada, the indigenous people have treaties with the Hudson's Bay Charter that the corporations have to respect. So even then, in this country, in our country up in Canada, which at its root is the same as your country's as well. And remember, the Common Law Court International is British origin. And if you don't know, you'll find on it legal documents from a gentleman named Gregory Hallett, who has proven that King Edward V is illegitimate, and that the whole monarchy thing is what they call a flatline monarchy. It was just a fraud put in front of the world. And he goes through the history of it. His documents have been presented at Queen's Bench, at Temple Bar. The Queen, Elizabeth Windsor, actually abdicated to him in 2015. This whole concept of royal assent and the Queen's consent and all that, it's an absolute fraud. So when people start to understand the construct of this is illegitimate, which makes the corporations and the governments illegitimate, go back to the indigenous natural people, then yes, you see that's where they start to get empowered and understand, okay, now we'll declare I own me, so to speak, through their given names, not the capital letters construct in your birth certificate, right? No matter how you
especially the capital letters, especially the capital letters.
Exactly. So the point being though, is that the people start to work with each other in their communities, right? Where each county or whatever you call it in your countries has their own sheriffs, their own common law courts. They're everything that they do, they take charge of.
Wow. I think that's where we're at right now. And again, this goes right back to how indigenous things function. And you mentioned the Queen, but you can't mention the Queen and not mention the Vatican, because at the top of all this whole thing, there's some folks sitting over there in Rome, the state inside of Rome, well, Rome inside of Italy, that's really pulling the strings around the globe.
Just know right now, from the intel people I talk to in the States, the assets of the Vatican, the assets of the monarchy, the assets of the corporate United States, they've all been seized. Okay. These people are all connected with human trafficking. And I don't want to take tonight's time to go over what took place in the Suez Canal, but it's connected, right? This corporate structure right now, they call it the cabal, is trying to they're on their last legs. They're trying to maintain their power and position. But right now, their codes in the World Bank, in the Federal Reserve, have all been cut off. Their money lines have been cut off. And people will be surprised to know that there is no power there. And it's like the rose. Yeah. It's like the rose that's been cut. It's only lasting a little while longer.
It's serious. No, I mean, again, you have to have the eyes to see that. That's why we're having this conversation tonight.
Yes.
I mean, the world is watching, and I definitely.
The key is simplicity, right? It's a natural law. It's the law of the planet. It's a law, universal law. It's the Galactic Codex. That's all it is. It's common sense. But to answer your first question, Common Law Court International, you will see the documents that have been submitted to the World Court, and Judge Weber can speak better to this than I can, but it has been proven that what we call, or people think is the monarchy, is illegitimate.
Mm-hmm. I fully agree, totally agree. But I would know that for obvious reasons as Rastafari. I could say that with authority.
There's no such thing as a constitutional monarchy. That's an oxymoron. Like you can't have those.
No, I totally agree. It's a fraud, but they've been doing it for so long. People have been born into it. This is all you ever saw, all you ever heard. And then there are the policy enforcers, also known as the police, that make sure that if you step out of line, they enforce these corporate policies to keep you in line.
Yesterday, we had a meeting with 2 police officers, active police service members. They've been following our actions. We've had 5 actions, citizens arrests in common law court. They're watching. There's a whole group in the police service that understand what they're doing is wrong. And it's just a matter of getting that entropy to be dissipated, and we get a coordination on a spiritual level of what's right and wrong, and it's happening. So
what happens when the police decide to break rank and as peacekeepers as opposed to enforcers? That creates a friction in the force.
No, but it creates at least the question arises on a moral, personal level, and that's what we've created. Okay. And again, we're meeting with these active police service members, and I asked Judge Weber to create an oath that is international in scope, that encompasses the protection of the rights of everybody, and we'll get you a copy of that. That if there are police service members that will step out, we call them constitutional sheriffs and peace officers, and will protect people, they will use this oath, because the ones that are in the corporations are not even following their oaths. They're not even following the Police Services Act. And if you look behind the parliamentary system, there's something called a Privy Council. If you've never read their oath, you will understand that they never disclose anything. They're not acting for us. They're not acting for our welfare.
It should also be added that we we were asking about the teeth of this thing, right? The common law court that we convened, which is a really simple process. Like, thank God we had Sensei on that one. But we convened that court on March 20th. 2 officers from that region came to my house, and I common lawed them and just said, yeah, you guys don't exist. I'm not under your authority, you know, toodles. And handed them the cease and desist from the tribunal that Judge Alfred had provided. And then I served the mayor of that city the night before the first uniformed officer in the whole country stepped out onto our lines. Of all the places in all of Canada that a uniformed officer chose to take action was in the same city that we did the tribunal. And then, you know, like because of these actions and because of these things, we got connected with Judge Alfred. Now we're here talking to you folks, you know,
wow.
like this is the teeth of it, wow. Is individuals being free and just simply taking action.
That's right. That's right.
From the galactic point of view, what they want for us is 3 things: that people be self-empowered, that they expand their consciousness and start to understand who they really are inside. And things are, the way people have lived the last 30 years, it's taken them away from the spirit of things. And we're bringing the spirit of it back into where we are. And if everybody does the same, the spiritual side of things will overcome anything.